I am Jeffrey St. Rose. Welcome to Enter the Poetic, a contemplative space for illumination. Episode 6, Emotional Wholeness. The poems featured in this episode connect with the astrology sign Cancer, working with attributes such as compassion, nurturance, emotional awakening, sensitivity, and transparency. The 6 poems featured in this episode are We Tasted What We Could of the Sea, A Place Where Fates Are Left, To Be Received in Splendor, The Silvering, Ulysses, and Then Sang Woman. We tasted what we could of the sea. We tasted what we could of the sea, the moon crossing the night like gossamer blossoms stroking the shore, all our understandings suddenly unneeded, the holy start of the silence alone, enough to let us endure the letting, the immensity that dreamt us all on its own without our instructions, living on the idea of wildness, thought from the universe when still a seed, a starfish wishing its small arms across the rocks and hollows. The sea is a symbol of emotional availability. This poem sets a scene at night by the ocean. Powered by the moon, this experience is a kind of initiation into stillness and connection. We tasted what we could of the sea is a way of saying we absorbed as much emotional energy as we could in order to more deeply feel the world around us and expand our emotional bodies to connect even more with the universe. The energy of the moon is likened to gossamer blossoms stroking the shore, signifying how this lunar light is coming to Earth and is a tangible presence assisting us in amplifying our emotional capacities, which quiet the mind to a point where we recognize that in this emotionally heightened moment, we don't need to over-intellectualize existence, but instead connect with it at the level of feelings. All our understandings suddenly unneeded, the holy start of the silence alone, enough to let us endure the letting. Our understandings are unneeded because we experience our connection of the universe through our heart centers, allowing the silence to magnify that, as the silence itself is enough to let us enter into the presence, the wholeness, and life as it is happening, which the poem refers to as the letting. This means accepting and engaging with life as it appears in each moment. The holy start of the silence is also enough to let us connect in with the immensity that dreamt us without our instructions, as we live close to the natural wildness of the world that the universe conceived when it was young, just emerging and beginning its vast expansion. A seed, a starfish wishing its small arms across the rocks and hollows, as the poem says. This immensity is available to access when we are still and able to open up to its majesty, allowing ourselves to feel awe for the beauty and wonder of existence. A place where fates are left. Just coming down into the cove from the crumbling narrows, I am caught once more by what is alive that I never took into my looking. Even the rocks must fall below to let the distance in. Where I step toward, the treasure is endless. This I have just begun to know. All of the ocean exists in one of its drops. None of myself is lost. With a bright necessity I have borne the curling surge of the tides flying into me. Some day you will say wake, and I will go and follow. In this poem, the speaker is describing a moment of emotional awakening. Just coming down into the cove from the crumbling narrows, I am caught once more by what is alive that I never took into my looking. The speaker is recognizing more of what is there that is alive and has presence that was never acknowledged or perhaps valued before. His perception of life has expanded. This happens when we are able to see with fresh eyes all that is around us and emotionally connect into it all to feel it as real, which means it becomes a living part of our experience. In order to accomplish that, the barriers of separation must dissolve. Even the rocks must fall below to let the distance in. In this image, the rocks and the cliff face are eroding, allowing more of the ocean to come closer. The ocean is the emotional body of the planet, and so we have here the sense of a deeper emotional bond and opening forming between the poet and the planet, especially in regards to the element of water. We have already learned from the first lines that the cliff is eroding, as it is described as crumbling narrows. This crumbling is also mirrored in the poet, as his barriers too are dissolving, making way for a more intimate connection with life. Where I step toward, the treasure is endless. This I have just begun to know. The poet is realizing that the more he moves toward a deeper emotional connection with life, that more of life will continually open and reveal itself to him. It is all there, we just have to allow it in. All of the ocean exists in one of its drops. None of myself is lost. There is a recognition here of unity, that all of creation exists within, and that his individuated soul already contains the wholeness, so that no part of himself has ever been forgotten or abandoned, though at times it may have felt that way. With a bright necessity I have borne the curling surge of the tides flying into me. The tides flying into him represent expanded life, reaching out and wanting to connect, drawing him deeper into discoveries about himself and the larger world. In order to keep growing, we have to let the expanded parts of ourselves enter and open us forward, as these expanded parts of ourselves break down what we no longer need, so we can more fully connect with the greater range of what is now available. Some day you will say wake, and I will go and follow. These final lines, with their emotional impact, fulfill the reach and scope of the poem, where the call to awaken has been heard, internalized, and carried out with deep significance. The poet is responding to this awakening call to follow his own path, rather than the paths of others, as any true awakening happens within, allowing what is inside to come out and be realized. We are all meant to awaken in our own ways and follow ourselves into new, amazing spaces. To be received in splendor. The wetness met us under the blue arch of the holy sky that holds the white gulls in its tender and tremendous presence, constantly awed by their own cries, flying over the floods, as we, in our waiting, draw the soul's waters from the sodden depths in which we stand, as they become visible and able to carry the vessel. Violet waters froth along the rocks. A moon-throated heron glides. The oils of sunset anoint the feathers, the crests. Swans spill out from the ebon shores, low over the lake, their wing-tips touching the stillness into ripples. All night the sea receives silver instructions from the moon. This poem is written in 3 sections. The first section reiterates what was discussed in the previous poem about drawing out what is within in order to make it visible and use it in tangible ways for expansion. We, in our waiting, draw the soul's waters from the sodden depths in which we stand, as they become visible and able to carry the vessel. Standing in the water has heightened an emotional experience, causing the emotional body to amplify. That amplification now becomes the cause for dynamic motion. As there is no separation, we can energetically draw sustenance from the waters we are physically standing in. In doing so, the soul's waters become materialized in some fashion, thus becoming recognized, and are now able to guide us forward as the ocean would carry a boat. It is by the drawing forth of our own soul's waters that we make them apparent and use them to carry us onward, as they now are able to sustain us. The second section of the poem details a serene scene which captures the beauty of nature and how it constantly blesses everything, concluding with a gentle but decisive motion. Violet waters froth along the rocks. A moon-throated heron glides. The oils of sunset anoint the feathers, the crests. Swans spill out from the ebon shores, low over the lake, their wingtips touching the stillness into ripples. What was previously motionless and contained has now been activated by the touch of wingtips, which has stirred the water into moving. Even a subtle, seemingly small gesture can have significant, far-reaching, and long-lasting effects. Each step forward we take sends out a vibrational resonance which impacts everything it connects with, which then responds in kind. Make each step forward true and from the most beautiful place inside you. The third section of the poem is short, measuring only 2 lines. All night the sea receives silver instructions from the moon. When we are emotionally awake, we can continue to receive uninterrupted guidance from our higher selves and the many spiritual realms, symbolized by the image of the moon guiding and instructing the sea to move based on its magnetic pull. The emotional body, by nature, is magnetic. We too are drawn by cosmic forces that are responding to our intentions to spiritually expand. The image can also be read to say that while we sleep, we receive relevant information we need, which we then can use once we are awake. The silvering. Deathly weathers flash in the marrow harrowing night, as I am pulled again by the unseen lunar might, a powerless pool or cloud, dragged with deep clash like a black and ragged shroud, undestroyed, but with all I still measure, lost and sea-tossed, left for a higher treasure. I take the quill and scribble here within this book, I have been killed by the moon and its silver look. This poem describes a transformational experience. The speaker is pulled by unseen cosmic forces which possess greater strength than he does, so he feels like a powerless pool, a cloud, or a ragged shroud that is being acted upon by potent forces he cannot resist or stop. During this dark night of the soul, he realizes that his true essence remains. Undestroyed, but with all I still measure, lost and sea-tossed, left for a higher treasure. He recognizes that in some ways he is still trying to measure his life by the way things were, while at the same time realizing that what has been lost has created an opening where he can bring in things that are more valuable to him now, as they serve him better for this new paradigm of his life. The old has been scattered and cast aside, so a higher way of being can find him and eventually become his new foundation. This poem captures a moment where your old life is in ruins, and while you understand it is ultimately for the best, you still feel the loss, as the new life has not yet fully come into being and taken root. Thus this experience is likened to a death, having been transformed by the gentle yet penetrating light of the moon, which is exposing dark or unresolved emotions so that healing can occur. I take the quill and scribble here within this book, I have been killed by the moon and its silver look. The light is shining on wounds that need to be resolved and healed, which will then open opportunities for a new way of being. The title, The Silvering, already shows an alchemical transformation has happened, one where the speaker has been remade in the likeness of the moon, and now contains some of its lunar light, perhaps appearing as a silvering of his aura and energetic fields, where he is now changed into something different, something more. Ulysses. I am noisy with blood. There is no cloud I have not died beneath. At evening there is always another beast. My longest want is to be sung to by my God. The task to blind the Cyclops is not as noble as it seems. To see everything through one eye is only a different kind of looking. This land is too long for my bones, though I cannot call the ocean home, since there is so much of it that I do not know. My heels are bleeding, and the cold is a second body I constantly wear over my own. But I have given up everything for this odyssey, and killed too much that I didn't understand, because it was easier and expected. And I think this voyage would have destroyed me if I wasn't returning the way that I am, shivering, free, and defeated. In this reframing of the main character in Homer's epic poem The Odyssey, Ulysses, using the Roman variation of the name, is recast as a more sensitive man, where he is emotional and reflective about his great journey. He still feels the spirit of adventure, as evidenced in the opening line, I am noisy with blood. He feels his physicality and wants to express that. There is no cloud I have not died beneath. At evening there is always another beast. Still a capable warrior, ready for battle, he is prepared to die if need be. But he begins to realize that he has had many deaths along the way, which he details later. As well, he starts to show a more emotional side of himself, as seen in the line, "My longest want is to be sung to by my God." He yearns for nurturance from a higher power, something to reassure and comfort him. He also begins to look at his actions from a different perspective. The task to blind the Cyclops is not as noble as it seems. To see everything through one eye is only a different kind of looking. He is developing empathy and learning to see things how others might in order to cultivate a sense of compassion, or at least understanding. Also, he is observing how his multiple journeys have taken their toll on him. "This land is too long for my bones, though I cannot call the ocean home, since there is so much of it that I do not know. My heels are bleeding, and the cold is a second body I constantly wear over my own." The hardships of his adventures have left their marks. Yet he continues, even while trying to reconcile or justify his quest because it was expected. "I have given up everything for this odyssey and killed too much that I didn't understand because it was easier and expected." He has been programmed to be a certain way, as that may have been the predominant thought of his day. But now he is reflecting on all his deeds, questioning whether or not they were noble, perhaps done out of fear or expectation. But he has redeemed himself to himself because he eventually recognizes the larger lessons inherent in his experiences and is willing to look within himself to understand the motives behind his behaviors. "And I think this voyage would have destroyed me if I wasn't returning the way that I am, shivering, free, and defeated." He is becoming more self-aware, and in doing so has made himself a more conscientious man, one who is self-reflective and able to integrate more of his feminine traits in order to become whole. Rather than returning in blind triumph, he understands that perhaps not everything he killed needed killing, and that not every battle may have been justified. He finds freedom in knowing that he is developing a more complete perspective of life, one that isn't ruled by a dominating consciousness, but is reliant on an internal code of ethics based on understanding and personal integrity. And then sang woman. One half of woman is song, the other half water. The grasses have aged around woman. Forests stretch with her breath. Each grass stalk wants to be woman. Some day the whole of woman will turn song. Then it will never burn. Nothing burnt can come from the grass when it's singing. There is more water than darkness in song. Woman is her own darkness. She is the song of her own scar. The darkness of man gives less water. Grass does not fatten the same around man. On the grass is where everything grieves, even the sea, the wind, and the woman. The sea burns to grieve where it's green, but the grass never grieves in the sea. Perhaps the grass is the sea's scar it leaves as it grieves. I think it was the sea who grieved first, and then sang woman out of its joy. Working to capture the many facets of woman, this poem uses a few words which are repeated throughout, but in different contexts, such as woman, water, song, grass, sea. It is a form I've developed in several other poems, where I use a handful of nouns and verbs, iterating them in subsequent lines that evolve the concepts of the poem. It is a sort of minimalist style I've worked with over the years to discover meaningful relationships between the various elements. Emotional transparency is a key energy in this poem. The idea of what it means to be woman is examined in different emotional modes. Woman is song and water, giving rhythm, life, and flow. She is also darkness and scars, seemingly comfortable in her ability to grieve and express herself in what she is feeling at each moment. Nature is drawn to woman because of her compassion and emotional resonances. The grasses have aged around woman. Forests stretch with her breath. Each grass stalk wants to be woman. Woman, like nature, is nourishing and expressive, so nature recognizes itself in her. Both nature and woman reflect each other, mirroring attributes of the divine feminine. It's as if nature itself has created woman in its own image to be a walking embodiment of its principles. This is especially apparent in the final lines. I think it was the sea who grieved first, and then sang woman out of its joy. The sea has given birth to woman out of its fullest emotional expressions, as sometimes the sea is dark and stormy, sometimes calm and playful. There is a healing energy in this poem, as it ends in a beautiful moment of joy after moving through various emotional transitions, each time uncovering more of what it is to be woman, and how she relates to her environment, as well as how her environment relates to her. What it means to be woman is still evolving and will continue to do so. The poem alludes to this evolution in the lines. Some day the whole of woman will turn song. Then it will never burn. Nothing burnt can come from the grass when it's singing. From these lines we get the sense that once the whole of woman has turned song, then her fullest evolution will have been achieved. Turning into song is a way of gathering the key energies and creating something beautiful that expresses the entire spectrum of experiences. Once the evolution is complete, woman will just naturally vibrate her highest and most divine radiance, as those vibrations become the ultimate song of herself. This can be seen as a reclaiming and complete embodiment of her most perfect essence. Thank you for listening, and go forth in great joy.